there. So for this video, I'm going to respond to a video titled An Open Letter to Atheists from a Priest. Now, typically I don't respond to these type of videos. I talk about stuff in regard to the culture war. However, it seems as though, of course, that I found a video that I found to be interesting because this video comes directly from a priest. He asked pretty interesting questions. And so, without further hesitation, let us see the video and I get my personal reactions and responses to the video.
Atheist. Thanks for clicking on this video. It means a lot to me, really. I'm a religious guy who's devoted my life to a God you don't believe in, so...
And that's perfectly fine to me. Because to me, I think people have the free will to believe in anything. And so to me, I don't really care if someone believes in a God or not. What I do care, however, is how people use their belief in a God to legislate over people. There are so many examples from what I've seen in the United States on which many people, regardless of the political spectrum, try to use the religion to justify more theocracy and more laws that reflect their religion. That's the only kind of problem that I have when it comes down to sort of religion in general. But overall, if someone has a belief in a God or whatever, I personally don't give a crap. Because to me, life is too short to be hung over like who believes and who not believes. And so I personally respect your own decision to become a priest and do whatever you want with your life.
You're taking a bit of a risk here that
I might insult you, make you feel bad about your life, or at the very least, waste your time. I really do appreciate it, and I hope not to do any of those things here. Rather, I'd like to pose a question to you. It's a very simple question, in fact. It is more of an exhortation from me to you. This question is not meant to trick you or convert you. I don't have some super ingenious question that will somehow inspire faith in a deity, as much as I'd love to. I'd rather just like to challenge you. You say that you're an atheist, that you don't believe in gods, and I just want to know one thing. Are you a good one?
Throughout the whole entire video that I've seen so far, basically his definition of a good atheist is someone who has the time, the effort to study about philosophies, explore the meaning of life, and to ask the big questions. When in reality, I don't think, of course, by his definition, I would be a good atheist per se. Mostly because I feel as though that one, I'm not an intellectual. That's obvious enough. But number two, I don't think people should be occupied with such questions. I think, of course, like with your belief in God and people have their free will to do whatever they want, I feel as though that people who don't believe, like me, who are not religious, don't necessarily have to be a good atheist and have to study about philosophy and any kind of stuff. Because to me, a person is good whether they study and took the time to do all these research or not, regardless if they are a good believer or like a non-believer or whatever. Because to me, a good person is through their actions. A good person is not necessarily their belief. For example, I consider a good person someone who helps like other people out, try to make people more like heaven on earth, for lack of a better phrase, you know. And so I don't think necessarily a person has to be good in order to do all this stuff. Like people have their lives to live. And so I don't think necessarily that just because a person doesn't have the time to study all this sort of theology stuff doesn't mean that they're a bad person.
Are you a good atheist? It's a question that I ask with two things in mind. The first being related to morality. While religion in general and Christianity in particular doesn't necessarily make someone a moral person, these ways of life do necessarily demand morality of adherence. There is a particular code of life that one must live. In the case of Catholic Christianity, that code is one of peace and justice, mercy and forgiveness.
That is too funny. That is really, really funny. Under any circumstances, what are some examples in which the Catholic Church has actually promoted, like, all the stuff that you just listed? You don't have to look back a long time ago to actually bring up examples about the atrocities that was committed by the Catholic Church. We hear stories all the time about, of course, how there are various cases of child molestation. Also, within the Catholic Church, they basically, of course, have this sort of anti-conception campaign in Africa, where pretty much if you were to, want to have a condom there, of course, they say, no, don't use the condom, don't use any sort of contraception. And of course, as we know right now, Africa is full of diseases like, Ebola, like STDs, and so on. And also, not to mention the various cases in which the Catholic Church has done atrocities in the past, too. So, I don't think necessarily that the Catholic Church is a good example of peace and kindness and happiness as an organization. It is true that Catholic people are, in fact, nice people, but the organization is pretty much corrupt to the bone. More so about morality. I think, of course, that when you go into morality, right, within Catholicism, you have to go to like the priest to make your confession, right? And so necessarily, like nothing is preventing a person, of course, from doing the most abhorrent thing possible. Because ultimately, a person underneath the Catholic faith can go to the priest, has confession, and of course, their sin is immediately forgiven. They could do the most heinous act possible, but their sin is forgiven. However, underneath Catholic doctrine, if a person is, of course, an atheist, they, of course, have, of course, like damnation to hell. And so, naturally, who is the more moral person? What if an atheist, just lived a life to the fullest, didn't commit acts of crime, try to treat their neighbors nice? Is it like the same sort of, just system that that we have to apply for like the Christian who probably have murdered somebody or whatever? How's it fair? How's it just? That's my question. Because to me, it's not fair, it's not judged for someone to be condemned to damnation for all of eternity just because they have no belief in God. That to me seems very abhorrent and more so absurd.
It's a code that seeks to care for the poor and seek reparations for those who take advantage of the vulnerable. Now, Lord knows we don't always live up to our founder and have actually done some pretty atrocious things through the years.
Yes, yes, the Catholic Church has done atrocious stuff throughout the years. Without a doubt, there's no questions in regards to that.
But it is our faith that at least informs us when we do these things and gives us and reminds us a moral code to live by, reminds us that it's not an option. We must strive to be good people. Now, as someone who doesn't have this foundation, who doesn't believe in a God or adhere to a religion, there is no superstructure making this demand on your life, no one telling you how to live in certain situations. Without a belief in an afterlife, there might be a feeling that all the world is futile, so what difference does it make? This, of course, does not need to be the case.
The thing about life, of course, is that people who happen to be non believers, they think that, of course, that you have one shot at life, that the meaning that you bring to life is something that you have to find for yourself. In normal circumstances, of course, like what they teach in like the Catholic school and stuff, is that pretty much like of course you have to wait until the afterlife to fully really live. Whereas they try to make heaven on earth by trying to, do whatever they want. And so because people who are atheists think that there is of course some sort of, one life only and one chance at life, that means of course that of course they want to try to abide by the rules and try to, try to be as good as possible while they have a chance in life. Of course, there are some good people, some bad people. At the same time, though, I do in fact believe that morality is also shaped just by how, of course, the culture is. Now, of course, a lot of the people that the founding founders, of course, influenced were by like the French Revolution and stuff, was the idea of secularism. And so I think that most Americans are influenced by how they were, of course, founded. And then also, morality issues are constantly changing all the time. And actually, before even the invention of Christianity, what I remember is that there were various ancient civilizations in which, of course, they were stone tablets or whatever you want to call it, about a set of morals that society deemed to be acceptable during that time period. Like, look no further than like the Kyoto Hobarashi to show like an example of like morality that was set before Christianity, or like the Egyptian morality too. So it seems as though, of course, that even though, of course, there's like no set dogma on what is good or what is not good, morality is shaped by culture. Morality is often shaped by what they deem to be good or bad. And so it also comes down to sympathy, because if a person has sympathy, they can sympathize what is good, what is wrong. So morality is a constant struggle among people, no matter their background.
Some of the world's greatest humanitarians, some of the most influential figures today promoting peace and justice efforts, are not adherents to a religion, but live morally out of a commitment to humanity, a recognition of our interconnectedness, an acknowledgement that there is something good in itself about loving one another, about sacrifice. And so I ask you, are you a good atheist? Even though there may be no eternal reward or punishment, even though you're free to do whatever you want.
Not really, not everything I want. Sorry, no, that's not true. Because the thing is, the speed rules, like, the rules have like the speed limits, right? You cannot just go across like the speed limit and, of course, not get in trouble, right? There's also cases of seatbelts when you drive a car, right? You can't literally just do everything you want in society. That's why there's rules. Necessarily, there's rules to protect other people, to have structure, to have order. And so you can't literally just do anything you want. You can't get away with murder. You can't get rid of rape or whatever, because there's literally just moral, like there are like rules to actually foment like these sort of stuff.
Do you choose the virtuous path that benefits not only you, but others? I hope so. The world needs good atheists. Now, of course, the word good points to more than just a sense of morality. It also represents an evaluation of aptitude. When I ask if you're a good atheist, I want to know if you're good at being an atheist. Do you articulate why you don't believe in God in a coherent way, or you just think that religion's dumb, so use logical fallacies? Have you
I'm kind of curious, like, what are some examples of, like, I guess, those using logical fallacies? Because in my case, whenever I look at these sort of like these sort of arguments about religion or whatever, it seems as though that a lot of the people who proclaim to have faith are the ones who use logical fallacies all the time. It's true, it probably is possible that there are some that use logical fallacies who are atheists, but for the most part, like, for example, one common argument that I keep hearing all the time, well, you see, a painter requires a painter, and so the universe requires a creator. For example, that's like one example that I could think of right now. How can you have, of course, morality without God? That's another one that I constantly hear all the time. Another one that I constantly hear all the time is basically, of course, people are Satan. They're evil for, wanting to, think the opposite of what you think. Another thing, of course, is the fallacy that I keep hearing all the time. Well, you see, Someone must be some sort of evil person because they don't have more. It's like I hear these sort of fallacies all the time, and so I guess no matter who does the argument, there are always going to be fallacies from whoever. But honestly, I need some examples of this.
Explored the depths of your mind and heart, asking the real questions of life, of death, faith, and reason, seeking to understand what this human life is really about, you just not want to go to church, so this'll do. Have you read the critical atheist thinkers of history? People like Nietzsche, Sartre, Feuerbach, Heidegger, people who really ask the challenging questions, who pose thoughtful insights of the world. Or just stick with people like Richard Dawkins, people who provide great sound bites for the cause, yippee, but do little to add anything to the world other than strawman arguments and divisiveness.
Now, the thing about Richard Dawkins, I don't really follow this guy per se, but there are some contributions in which he did do that actually help benefit mankind. Take no further than the idea of the meme. That comes directly from Richard Dawkins. He also made like a lot of contributions to biology and science by recently publishing these series of books about like the I think about biology. And so while you may disagree on like his position about like, religion in general, he has in fact contributed to having some sort of books that help progress the advancement of science. Personally, I don't listen to Dawkins myself, but I can recognize there is some stuff that he has done.
Have you read for yourself the works of real theologians, people articulating our beliefs in the best way we know how? Karl Rahner, John Henry Newman, Joseph Ratzinger, Augustine of Hippo, Henri de Lubac? Or do you stick with the simplicity of evangelical pastors from some rural anti intellectual church?
The thing about it, though, is that I feel as though there are different types of people who can respond to different things. Now, naturally, of course, like in local communities, depending on where you live in the country, there are some people that have direct context with the evangelicals. And sometimes the evangelicals are the ones that try to run the show. More recently, Donald Trump of course, he's not necessarily religious per se, but he has appealed to the evangelicals and has, of course, attacked the Johnson Amendment, which pretty much try to separate the political, like, getting funding from, like, letting the church to fund, like, the political candidates, right? And of course, the many different cases where, like, a lot of the Republicans also use the Ten Commandments to put on, like, the federal buildings. And so there's also cases in the past where there were creationism in our schools. And so sometimes the loudmouth ones, sometimes the ones that don't necessarily represent you, are the ones that, do everything, have the power. And so it's unfortunate that happens. Like, of course, I do in fact believe that there are intellectuals who are Christians, who are like scientists and great writers, poets, and whatever. But unfortunately, they're not necessarily the ones in power. The extreme ones are the ones in power. And so, depending on where you live, whatever, I think both criticisms, no matter who you're going at, is perfectly as valid as the other.
I ask all of this not to be accusatory, at least not overly accusatory, but to simply challenge you to go deeper in your thought. Simply declaring yourself an atheist and going about your life isn't enough, just as saying you're a Christian and never reading the Bible wouldn't be enough. Ask more questions, read more perspectives, be able to articulate your understanding of the world with logic and reasoning that will actually add something to the world. Because here's the thing, people of faith need you to be good atheists. We do. As a Christian, I don't want you to be a bad atheist with an unexplored mind just regurgitating fallacies. I want you to ask questions that we've never thought to answer. I want you to be so smart that it challenges us to be smarter. As crazy as it sounds, I would much rather you be a good atheist than just an atheist.
Yeah, I don't think no one is actually under any sort of, obligation to, try to go study every sort of philosophy or whatever. I just want to live my life to the fullest. I have no time to, think about all this theology stuff. But I guess different strokes for different folks. But anyway, that's my personal response to this video. I hope that my response was interesting enough. And as always, I'll see you guys in the next video.